Hello learners, the topic of today's session is ecotourism and livelihood security. Well, you must have heard the term livelihood many times. Well, it refers to a means of securing the necessity of life, the methods or the means of making a living. So basically what we mean by livelihood, it is what one does for a living. And another term is livelihood security. For example, if I say across the globe, the COVID-19 pandemic has caused loss of life and livelihood. Every economic sector is affected and livelihood security of many has been compromised. So what exactly do we mean by livelihood security? To understand this, we need to look into the meaning of the word security. Now, security, it is the state of being free from danger or threat, a feeling or sense of being protected. Therefore, simply put, we can say security means safety, as well as the measures taken to be safe or protected. Now, livelihood security, if you combine the two words livelihood and security, it can be understood as the access to income and resources to meet basic needs and thus acquiring a sense of being safe. So, the most fundamental objective of all governments is to explore all varied measures and options to ensure livelihood security for its citizen. So today in this session, we will look at ecotourism as a source of ensuring livelihood security. And after going through this session, you will be able to understand what determines livelihood security, understand the concept of ecotourism and sustainability, and then we will try to contextualize ecotourism within the sustainability development concept as a livelihood securing measure. So what determines livelihood security? You see, a defining parameter is poverty. And so we can say the eradication of poverty, it can be seen as a way of livelihood security. And there are various aspects of poverty, but conventional approaches, it usually focused only on certain aspects of poverty characterized by provision of access to the three basic needs of human being. So what are those? Food, clothing, and shelter. Now, among these three elements also, the emphasis is given on achieving food security. So this is one of the reasons why most of the humanitarian aids and governmental schemes in poverty-stricken countries in the 1970s and the 1980s were related to provision to make food available, which means if they feel if you provide them food, then the livelihood security is to some extent it has been achieved. But life is not only about survival, because if you talk about survival, it is the state or the act or the fact of continuing to live or exist. And for that, the three basic needs of food, clothing, and shelter suffice. But life is also about living. And that is the reason why the term livelihood security is used, and we do not use the term survival security. And a more comprehensive and dimensional approach of livelihood does become necessary. Now, different individuals in society had varying degree of access or entitlement to resources in times of stress and different ways of coping. And thus, considering only eradicating the financial aspects of poverty, it does not solve the bigger issue in the long run. So, a livelihood consists of capabilities, assets, the activities that are required for living, and thus the need to address other aspects was felt and recognized. For example, resources such as land or property, then food, knowledge, finances, social relationships, health facilities, educational opportunity, etc. So based on lessons from practical experiences and emerging theoretical framework, requirement of a more durable or sustainable approach was felt, and thus emerged the concept of sustainable living and the sustainable livelihood framework, or which we in short call as the SLF. Now, livelihood can be classified as sustainable if it is resilient in the face of external shocks and stresses, if it is independent from external support, if it is able to maintain the long-term productivity of natural resources, and if it does not undermine the livelihood options of others. When we talk about the undermining the livelihood options of others, we are looking into the ethical aspects also. Then there is another definition of livelihood security, which is given by the UN Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, UNESCAPE. It says the ability to cope and recover from unexpected events, while at the same time enhancing current and future capabilities. Now, this definition, it interlinks the definition of resilience, sustainability, and livelihood, as each one of them affects the other. The sustainability element, it implies that individuals or communities can confront and overcome moments of stress and or crisis, and that they are able to maintain or even improve upon the current and the future skills and assets without exploiting their supply of natural resources. The SLF is an approach that provides a holistic an overview, an overall understanding of the livelihoods of the poor. It centers on the assets of the poor and on how they can increase their ability to withstand shocks to their livelihood. Now, 5 assets are identified, which we collectively refer to as the Pentagon model. One is human capital, which includes skills, knowledge, labor ability, good health, and all these things collectively allow people to pursue livelihood. If you're not healthy, you will not be able to take on the job that you are doing to earn your livelihood. Now, social capital, it consists of the specific social resources that are necessary to pursue one's own unique livelihood. And this can be fostered via establishment of networks, then a trusting relationship and memberships of formalized group. So being a part of a formalized group, it is also considered as social capital. The third is natural capital, and it consists of the natural resources or stocks from which the resource flows and the sources are derived. This natural resource stocks includes elements such as say, nutrient cycling, erosion protection, both which are useful for maintaining livelihood. Now, next is the physical capital, which represents the resources available to support viable livelihood. Now, this may include, say, clean water, adequate sanitation, and effective shelter. Then financial capital is the last asset, and it consists of the financial resources that are required if people want to fulfill their livelihood objectives. And the basis for this paradigm shift in approaches from, say, economic growth to development towards a focus on well-being and sustainability, it can be attributed to the Brundtland Commission report in 1987, which defines sustainable tourism as a development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. This is a very famous and often quoted sustainable development definition. There were many other contributing events in subsequent years, but if you look in the context of livelihood security, a defining movement was the adoption of the Household Livelihood Security in 1994 as a framework for relief and development by CARE. CARE, it is a major international humanitarian agency which stands for Cooperative for Assistance and Relief Everywhere. So how do they define household livelihood security? It is defined as adequate and sustainable access to income and resources to meet basic needs, and it will include adequate access to food, then potable water, health facilities, educational opportunities, housing, time for community participation, and social integration. Now, if you look at some of the initiatives which aids livelihood security in India, we can mention the National Food Security Act, the Public Distribution System, the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. See, livelihood can be made up of a range of non-farm and off-farm activities which provide together a variety of procurement strategies. And livelihood are secure when households have secure ownership of or access to resources and income earning activities. This is very important. Income earning activities, which including reserves and assets to offset risks, ease shocks, and meet contingency. So among the various sustainable income earning activities, let us now look at ecotourism. Ecotourism, it is derived from the Greek word oikos, which refers to house or habitat. And the concept was coined in 1981 by Hector Levalu Lascuren, a Mexican architect. And he says, ecotourism is that tourism that involves traveling to relatively undisturbed natural areas with the specific object of study, admiring, and enjoying the scenery and its wild plants and animals, as well as any existing cultural aspects found in these areas. And ecotourism implies a scientific, aesthetic, or philosophical approach, although the ecotourist is not required to be a professional scientist, an artist, or a philosopher. So the main point is that the person who practices ecotourism has the opportunity of immersing him or herself in nature in a way that most people cannot enjoy in their routine urban existence. So this person will eventually acquire, say, a consciousness and knowledge of the natural environment together with its cultural aspects, and this will convert him into somebody keenly involved in conservation issues. There are other definitions, more precise. The World Conservation Union says environmentally responsible travel to natural areas in order to enjoy and appreciate nature and accompanying cultural features, both past and present, which promotes conservation and have a low visitor impact and provide for beneficially active socio-economic involvement in local people is what they term as ecotourism. The International Ecotourism Society says ecotourism is responsible travel to natural areas that conserves the environment, sustain the well-being of the local people, and it involves interpretation and education. So the characteristics we can find out from here, the characteristics of ecotourism. First, it involves traveling to natural destination. Then the provision of financial benefits and support for local people and for conservation effort. The third one is a minimum consumptions of resources. Then the building of environmental and cultural awareness. It also involves responsible behavior on the part of tourists and tourism industry, and empowering local communities through participation or involvement in decision making. And there are several levels of community involvement. One is tokenism. See, tokenism is just you employ some members of the community as drivers, tour guides, etc. You are not involving much of them. Another is informing, where the communities are informed about the ecotourism development being planned, and then they are involved through employment in the ecotourism activities. Another level of community involvement is consulting. So here the communities are consulted, but where the aspiration of the community might or might not be addressed. So in this instance, the community would have the space to influence a decision while not being a formal part of the decision-making process. Another is collaborating, where communities are seen as equal partners in the ecotourism development which is being planned, and the benefits also goes back to the community. Another is ownership. Now this is where the community owns the enterprise and which becomes the capital of the community. So you can see ecotourism is a combination of nature-based tourism, then conservation supporting tourism, environmentally educated tourism, and sustainably managed tourism. So all this indicates that the root of ecotourism is sustainable tourism practices. Now there are three dimensions or pillars of sustainable development. One is economic sustainability, social sustainability, and environmental sustainability. We can add another one to that called as ethical sustainability also. See, economic sustainability, you generate prosperity at different levels of the society and addresses the cost effectiveness of all the economic activity. Now, social sustainability, it is respecting human rights and equal opportunity for all in society. And environmental sustainability, it looks into conserving and managing resources, especially those that are not renewable, and those are precious in terms of life support. So apart from the dynamic growth and being a major contributor to the economy, tourism is in a very special position in the contribution it can make to sustainable development and the challenges it presents, because unlike other form of sector, the consumer, here it is the tourist, he travels to the producer and the product. The product or the producer does not come to the tourist goes there. So globally, tourism is recognized as an effective method to enhance the livelihood of the local community. So in 2002, the Johannesburg Summit on Sustainable Development identified tourism as a primary sector for poverty alleviation. See, ecotourism, it implies ecologically sound, sensitive tourism, and the emphasis is on conservation, education, traveler responsibility, and active community participation. And also an ecotourist usually have different ideologies from that of a regular tourist. Thus, the chances of us achieving sustainability are very high. Now, since ecotourism is based on natural environment and is ideally on community involvement, its development will serve to contribute to the growth and development of a country through the utilization of the abundance of natural resources. At the same time, uplifting communities by ensuring that there are opportunities for them to engage in alternate livelihood strategies. Now let us look at some of the livelihood models through some concrete examples of how ecotourism initiatives and activities can be seen as livelihood models. The first case is Thenmala in Kerala. So this model, it reflects how ecotourism, it helps to enhance the livelihood opportunity leading to the socio-economic development of communities. Now, Thenmala is India's first ecotourism project, and it is located in the district of Kollam at the foothills of the Western Ghats. In 1998, the Thenmala Ecotourism Society, which is a government of Kerala undertaking, it was formed to promote ecotourism activities, and it's surrounding with the cooperation of the Forest Irrigation and Tourism Department. And according to a research study which has been done, it has been reported that the local community has a strong view that there are various livelihood opportunities available in Thenmala after the implementation of this particular ecotourism project. More than 70% of the staffs are from the local community, and it has given benefits to the self-help group. Then local community is associated with this project as local service providers and small-scale entrepreneurs. There is a provision for training and camps to enhance the hard and soft skills of the people. Then the project also empowered women, and they're able to support the family with an additional income. Now, the second case is the Mountain Shepherd Initiative at the Nanda Devi Biosphere Reserve in Uttarakhand. And this case study is an example of how the community, seeing the impending tourism development in the region, they took charge and evolved as a community-based and owned tourism initiative. In May 2001, the state government, with the support of the Ministry of Environment and Forest, it commissioned the Indian Mountaineering Foundation to determine the feasibility of reopening the park to limited tourism activity. So in response to this development, the Bhotia community came together to form the Nanda Devi campaign, while the community members of Niti Valley declared the Progressive Biodiversity Conservation and Ecotourism Declaration to guide its future endeavors, and they also held a workshop elaborating the community-based ecotourism proposal. And in the fall of 2006, the Mountain Shepherd Initiative was formally organized, and the focus was to build capacities for the youth and to develop a product line and marketing. There were two more important impact, which is one is economic impact, which is almost the same with other tourism products, and another is again conservation. The third case is the Sundarbans Jungle Camp. And this is a case is an example of collaboration between the community and the private player in the tourism industry. Now, this camp, it is located in Bali Island, which is part of India Sundarbans, a mangrove forest and a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Around the year 2000, there was a marked increase in the poaching in the forests of the Sundarbans, and in response to this, what happens is the field director of the Tiger Reserve at WWF India West Bengal invited Help Tourism, a tour operator and destination management consultant, to develop a community-based tourism demonstration project. So apart from supporting conservation efforts and creating alternate livelihood opportunity, one of the major motivations for this initiative was also to counter the mega mass-based tourism that was being planned around that time. So here also the involvement of the community member was seen, and 70% of the raw material was purchased locally, while 70% of the profits were retained within the area. Then the local employment, active role of the community in the decision-making process. The fourth case is the village of Wairebo on Indonesia's Flores Island. And this case, it highlights a slow tourism growth model. Now, this village is inhabited by around 1,200 residents from the Manggarai indigenous group. And the village begins its dalliance with ecotourism in 2007. The speciality of this village is the 5-story tall cone-shaped drum houses called as the Barumang in the Tombo Manggarai village. So in the early 2000, local approached the Indonesian ecotourism NGO Endicol with the idea of patching up this Wairebo's 2 ailing drum houses and building 5 new ones, and thereby introducing ecotourism in the process. Now, a series of high-level meetings, which was followed in Jakarta, the capital of Indonesia, and eventually the building component of the project was taken up with funding from private donors. So reaching this village, it requires a 7-hour-long drive through rugged roads, jungle roads, but still lots of tourists came into it. The speciality, like I said, it is the drum houses, which are unique, and it is made up of a palm thatch. The 15-meter high or 50-foot buildings are each home to 6 to 8 families who live side by side, as they have done for centuries, in small adjacent rooms separated by curtains for privacy. The families, they share the large hut built into the center of the floor, and sacred drums hang above it. And it is a medium to communicate with the ancestral spirit. Now, each house has 5 floors, each with a specific purpose. If you look into it, the second floor, for instance, it is used to store food and supplies, whereas the 5th is reserved for offering to the spirits. So out of these 2 houses in the village, they have been designated specifically for tourists. Now, the concern is that as its popularity as a destination grew, whether the community's tradition and way of life could be sacrificed in the process. But the villagers, they were very clear about it. The residents of the village, they have traditionally relied on coffee production as a primary source of income. So they had never wanted tourism to take the place of agriculture. They felt that it has to go hand in hand. We realized that if business is too booming, it will backfire for the culture. So the villagers, they had the sense to foresee the future. So here ecotourism and agriculture, it work side by side, and all the revenues, it goes into the fund managed by the community members who put it towards maintaining the houses and the grounds, funding children's education through university, building new houses, and maintaining a pension for the elderly. Let us try to sum up what we have gone through in this session. Livelihood security in its simplest form, it is the ability of a household to meet its basic needs. And the basic needs goes beyond the 3 needs of food, clothing, and shelter. Therefore, apart from adequate food, it also needs health, minimum levels of income, basic education, and community participation. The most fundamental objective of all government is to explore all varied measures and options to ensure livelihood security for its citizen. And today in this session, we have seen how ecotourism can be a source of ensuring livelihood security, that too adhering to the sustainability concept. I hope the session has helped you to understand the connection between ecotourism as a model for sustainable livelihood security, achieving livelihood security. Thank you.